Author, professor, and psychologist Csikszentmihalyi once wrote, "Creativity is a central source of meaning in our lives for several reasons. First, most of the things that are interesting, important, and human are the results of creativity. The second reason that creativity is so fascinating is that when we are involved in it, we feel that we are living more fully than during the rest of life. Creativity is a process full of risk, yet also full of joy. But how does creativity relate to giftedness? Throughout history, creativity has played varying roles in the models of giftedness that have been developed. At the start of the 20th century, definitions of giftedness were confined strictly to references of one's intellectual ability, and a high IQ was the sole requirement for consideration. However, over time, more and more models of giftedness have begun to shift to include some component of creativity. While such models of giftedness are so numerous that it would be impossible to list them all here, some of the most common include Gagnier's differentiated model of giftedness and talent, Vygotsky's dynamic theory of giftedness, Tannenbaum's star model, Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence, and last but not least, of which we will focus on here, Renzulli's three-ring conception of giftedness. In Renzulli's three-ring conception of giftedness is portrayed as being the intersection of three attributes: above-average ability, task commitment, and creativity. Each of the three attributes may be represented differently in order to produce giftedness, but all three of them must be present. If just one attribute is lacking at all in a person, Renzulli would claim that person is not gifted. So what does this mean for creativity? Well, assuming that the attribute of creativity is absent, that would imply that person does not possess the necessary traits for giftedness. Thus, since this model claims a direct connection between giftedness and creativity, it could be said that one who is not creative is not gifted. The reverse, one who is gifted is creative, may also be true. However, the statement that one who is creative is gifted may or may not be true according to the presence or absence of the other two attributes in the model. There are many questions surrounding this conception of giftedness, though, in part due to its lack of a definition for creativity. Renzulli does recognize, though, that depending upon the makeup of the child, there are two different types of giftedness which may be recognized: schoolhouse giftedness and creative productive giftedness. Creative productive giftedness, which results in tangible materials and products which aim to impact society and that can be shared with an audience, is the most difficult of the two to recognize in students. And interestingly, this type of giftedness has little correlation to intelligence. Because of the complexity of creative productive giftedness, it is rarely, if ever, quantifiable with a test score, which means teachers must turn to the recognition of potential giftedness and the mind-boggling question of how to foster that potential within a student. But first, a bigger question: can a child's creative productivity be nurtured? And if so, under what conditions can a teacher help transform potential giftedness into full-fledged creative productive giftedness? Csikszentmihalyi actually proposes that children cannot be creative because, according to his definition of creativity, they have not yet lived long enough to master an old way of doing something and then change it in some way. What, you say? That's ridiculous. Children are some of the most creative people I've ever been around. But wait, don't get too bent out of shape yet. He is really trying to get at the same idea we just talked about, the idea of recognizing potential creative productive giftedness. He goes on to say that while children cannot be creative, all creative adults were once children. Thus, perhaps we should look at creative productive adults like Einstein, Churchill, or Tolstoy and examine their childhoods to see traits that they may have shared at that point in their lives. While none of these creative productive adults showed anything more than potential for creativity during their childhood, they, along with countless others, did display great curiosity regarding their surroundings. He recounts Darwin collecting large beetles from under tree bark, and Linus Pauling helping his father mix drugs in the pharmacy. But these examples of a child's keen curiosity were encouraged by their parents. So we can infer that parents and other family members are essential in growing that potential creative productivity into giftedness. But what about teachers? Do teachers play any role in this process? After all, students spend a majority of their waking hours at school with their teachers and fellow classmates. In the lives of those creative, productive individuals whom Csikszentmihalyi references in his book, he notes that school itself had little effect on these people. However, most of them did have an individual teacher who saw their potential and helped develop their interest. So, can teachers play a role in growing potential into giftedness? Of course, but how? How can teachers be influential in this growth process? Truthfully, there are more answers to this question than we have time for now, but here are the top answers according to Csikszentmihalyi. The first thing influential teachers do is notice the student and their abilities. Second, influential teachers show they care by challenging the student to keep up their interest in their special ability, both during class as well as resourcing the student with extra work to pursue outside of class in the area of interest. My own personal experience in school reflects this so well. As an elementary student, my Spanish teacher took note that I had an exceptional ability for both comprehending and speaking Spanish. Not only wasn't I good at it, but I enjoyed Spanish class more than any other part of my week. So she started sending home extra things with me to help me practice and learn even more than I could through a once-a-week lesson from her. While I did not necessarily go on to become a famous Spanish language expert, the interest she took in me did lead me to continue pursuing Spanish, even to the point of majoring in the language, as well as being afforded countless opportunities to be a translator in various circumstances. None of this may have ever happened if Senora Cash hadn't noticed me and cared. So teachers can influence the growth of potential into giftedness. But another important factor at play here is that creativity is a skill that can be taught, must be taught. So how does a teacher teach creativity? We could write a book to answer this question. In fact, there are already books and articles galore on this topic. But here's the short rundown. Teaching creativity requires an enthusiastic teacher, accepting individual differences, encouraging self-initiated projects, acknowledging that IQ scores aren't the end-all be-all, not allowing the pressure of testing to get the best of you, encouraging divergent thinking, avoiding sexual stereotypes, allowing children to be odd, and using humor. Creative thinking techniques such as brainstorming, idea evaluation, and attribute listing must also be taught directly to students. Creative problem solving and creative dramatics stimulate and employ many of these techniques. Csikszentmihalyi also brings to light 7 elements that make creativity possible, which can easily be applied to the classroom setting in order to teach creativity and nurture creative productive giftedness. Training, expectations, resources, recognition, hope, opportunity, and reward. Let's take a closer look at each one of these. Number 1, training. Lack of training or opportunity yields lack of talent. If we want our students to develop creative abilities in particular domains, then they must have the opportunity to explore these domains. Number 2, expectations. High expectations are essential for the production of high achievement, and thus creativity. And these high expectations must not just come from family and school, but from the entire community. While there is such a thing as having unrealistic expectations, perhaps we should hold our children to higher expectations if we ever expect to see creative contributions to society from our younger generation. Number 3, resources. As with expectations, there lies somewhere a happy balance between not providing enough and providing too many. If we want to encourage creativity in our students, we must ensure that the necessary material and intellectual resources are available to them. while also understanding the positive role that challenge and hardship can play in one's motivation. Number 4, recognition. Recognition also plays a role in motivation. Without recognition from a mentor, teacher, or other significant person in the field, one's motivation will certainly begin to fade. 5 and 6 actually belong together, hope and opportunity. They go hand in hand. In order to nurture creative, productive giftedness, one must have hope that their skills, talents, and abilities will eventually be able to be used in the real world. And that hope must someday be turned into actual opportunity. Without opportunity, the creative, productive giftedness vanishes. Number 7, reward. A balance of both intrinsic and extrinsic reward are essential to helping one's creativity to blossom. But according to most researchers, the importance of the intrinsic reward and motivation far outweighs that of the extrinsic. One more crucial ingredient in nurturing creative, productive potential is flow, the pure enjoyment of creating. As teachers, we can cultivate flow for our students in many ways. Ensuring an appropriate amount of challenge such that boredom is not an option, offering clear and productive feedback, allowing time for the production, development, and implementation of ideas, encouraging students to be intrinsically motivated through their productions of creativity, releasing them from fear of failure and self-consciousness, and helping them to develop clear goals throughout their creative processes. Flow can also be cultivated through infusing opportunities for play into learning, in turn nourishing that creative, productive potential. Csikszentmihalyi once said, in reference to creative people, "If I had to express in one word what makes their personalities different from others, it would be complexity. Like the color white that includes all the hues in the spectrum, they tend to bring together the entire range of human possibilities within themselves." He also describes 10 sets of paradoxical traits of creative individuals. Number 1, a great deal of physical energy, yet quiet and at rest. Number 2, they're smart, but also naive. Number 3, they possess a spirit of playfulness, yet are also very disciplined. Number 4, they possess a spirit of imagination and fantasy while also being rooted in a sense of reality. Number 5, they are extroverted, but also introverted. Number 6, they are humble, yet proud. Number 7, they possess a sense of masculinity, yet also femininity. Number 8, they are rebellious, yet independent. Number 9, they are passionate, yet objective. And number 10, they are open, yet also sensitive. As teachers, we can nurture creative, productive potential in students through recognizing these seemingly polar opposite sets of traits, encouraging the student to develop the traits on both ends of the spectrum, and appreciating the unique personality of such students who color our classrooms in such a special way. More and more models of giftedness, such as Renzulli's 3-ring conception of giftedness, are beginning to recognize the essential connection that exists between giftedness and creativity. And that's great news. But even more important, we as teachers must learn to recognize, encourage, nourish, and appreciate the potential for creative, productive giftedness that exists in so many students who we often overlook. We must no longer obscure the beauty of our rainbows, but let them shine for all to see.